LSU finally gets a much-needed win over the Arkansas Razorbacks. Willie Green and the Pelicans part ways. And then we also have Gayle Benson inserting her foot into her mouth regarding the current general manager of the Saints. We're talking about that and so much more today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in as always. I want to get to some stuff because today is not necessarily going to be the same as what it has been in the past. Because it just feels like way too much was going on over the weekend to truly justify a weekend wrap-up edition like we normally do, where we hit on a lot of teams from across the state of Louisiana. We're going to give you kind of the brass tacks about some of the ball games across the state of Louisiana, especially when it comes to your FCS teams. We usually go winners first here, but I think this weekend got a lot of headlines more because of what happened on Friday, as well as what was said on Saturday morning, especially early on, with Willie Green given Das Boot. This Pelicans team has been awful, and it felt like it was time for him to exit stage left. Lo and behold, it took the Pelicans just a few games into the 2025-26 season to do so. 2-10 start in his fifth season at the helm. And again, I don't think this is any fault of his own. I think this was past due. But, and I think there's a big emphasis on the word but here, it was inevitable. He has been incredibly mediocre over the last couple of seasons because of injuries. Those have just piled up. And again, having that kind of bad luck can only save your career only so much. And it just feels like right here, right now, this franchise is at an impasse. And we're going to be entering that moment where they are going to have to determine who the next head coach is going to be, and they'll have the entire season to plan that out. They're really the first ones to drop this. Again, we haven't even reached Christmas yet, and that's really when I think everybody's eyes start to shift over slowly but surely towards this new era of the Pelicans. James Borrego was named the new interim coach, and Joe Dumars said in a press release, it really wasn't the won and loss record as the ultimate determining factor. We have to establish who is going to be here in New Orleans going forward, and I just did not see that happening with Willie Green. We saw a losing team losing the same way over and over again. That's not improvement. We have to establish that we're going to play hard every night before you can become anything in this league. You have to establish that first. That's still what I'm looking for right now. And this has been just a long time coming because, again, you've had so many things go against this Pelicans team. Zion Williamson and the injury bug he's been dealing with is obviously going to be something that we've been talking about and will continue to talk about because it is such a big part of the overarching story regarding what's going on with this franchise. If he was healthy, we wouldn't. I firmly believe we would not be talking about Willie Green being fired and now Zion Williamson getting ready to have, let's see, I believe this would be his fourth head coach in the NBA with the same team. Think about that. Think about the Pelicans' head coaching history. Since you had Zion Williamson drafted all the way back in 2019. You had Alvin Gentry, who took over after the Monty Williams, arc ran its course. Alvin Gentry had 5 years. He's out the door. Stan Van Gundy, 1 year. Then Willie Green gets fired 10 games into a season, into his fourth season at the helm. Now you've got an interim head coach. And again, This is going to be potentially the fourth head coach of Zion Williamson's career dating back to 2019. And yes, the New Orleans Pelicans fan base still showing up in droves supporting this franchise, as they should, but at the same time, they are not getting it done. They are just incredibly, and I mean incredibly, underwhelming offensively. And they lost again last night. At the time of the taping of this podcast, saw that Pelicans lost 124-106. There have been a lot of belt-to-ass games they've lost. Just look at the games over the last 7 days. Last Monday, you lost 121-98 to the Phoenix Suns. You lost to the Trailblazers on Wednesday night, 125-117. You lose 118-104 to the Los Angeles Lakers on Friday night. Then last night, it's against the Warriors, 124-105. And the fun part is you've still got 2 games left of this homestand. And you have a back-to-back to start off Borrego taking over as the interim head coach. Brother, it is an absolute mess over there. And it just feels like things are only going to get worse. I'm hoping things will right the ship. But when you see everything that's been going on with this Saints franchise and the Pelicans, they're in the same boat. But I think this Pelicans team is on even more shaky ground simply because they haven't gotten a whole lot of great results. And Gayle Benson said in a press conference, said in an interview with Jeff Duncan, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, is that neither of these teams are up for sale, period, end of story, which is the right way to handle this situation, to come right out in front and say, we aren't planning on selling this team. That said, I think they have this Pelicans team as almost a part of their portfolio. Seriously, go look at this Saints team over the last few years. It's been up and down for the better part of a decade. You know, obviously you had a couple of really good years with Drew Brees towards the tail end of his career, especially after drafting Alvin Kamara. The 2017 draft will go down as one of the best of all time for this franchise and for Mickey Loomis. But they're the main money generator. The Pelicans have always been secondary and even tertiary because, like it or not, Louisiana is more of a baseball state. LSU draws tons of fans. Cajuns baseball draws tons of fans and a lot more of national publicity. Again, LSU's won 2 national championships in the last 3 years. The Pelicans have gotten bounced out of the play-in tournament twice in the last 4 years, since the play-in tournament was basically devised. Think about that. So you got all that. And if you are the front office, you're sitting there like, why are we continuing to go through this feedback loop? We're sitting here and this franchise is not getting better. What do? I think you have to reevaluate who's running in that front office. I think Joe Dumars has a chance to do some good things, but I have not seen him execute the way I'm wanting to see him execute. Meanwhile, you have Gayle Benson. She is backing her GM. She's standing by her man. And I think that's also a detriment to her. Mainly because Gayle Benson said in an interview with Jeff Duncan of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, it was an exclusive interview, really great stuff. Gayle basically backed Mickey Loomis, saying she holds him in high regard and high esteem and is pleased with his work. She goes on to say, quote, "It may not be what the fans want to hear, but as far as firing Mickey Loomis, that's ridiculous. He does a great job," end quote. Just that statement alone kind of drove me up a wall on Friday morning when I saw this post come up on Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it. He does a great job. How does this man do a great job. Again, PR is the way, that's the way it is nowadays. Everybody wants to say, oh, hey, we're doing just fine. And you're using coach speak, or in this case, GM speak, to defend a guy that has been lambasted, and justifiably so, for putting this team in the situation they're in. The Saints, around about 10, 12, 13 years ago, not too long after the Saints won the Super Bowl, Drew Brees took on that big old contract. And that more or less has led to you being in a state of eternal cap hell. Like, seriously, you look at the Saints and how they are doing with the cap hell they are dealing with. They were in a massive amount of debt in terms of the cap. They were right around over the cap space last season, last couple of years. They've made the adjustments because they keep having to kick the can down the road. Eventually, there's going to be no can left to kick. Right here, right now. This season, this team had $99,180,357, third in the league in dead cap money. Yeah, that's not good at all. Next year, it'll be a paltry $87,563,745, the most dead cap in the league. The league. Now, hopefully, by 2027, this team will be better. But you are $16 million over the cap at this point. Worse than the league. That is going to come with some really tough conversations certain players are going to have. Especially when you look at the top of that list. You've got Cam Jordan. He's 37 years old, or he'll be 37 years old by the time he gets to 2026 season. He's not necessarily feeling all that great. I feel like he's just going to go ahead and hang it up. That's going to knock off 6% of your budget, and I think that might help you get some cap room, but you're going to have to continue to readjust guys, especially to keep certain players like a Chris Olave. According to rumor and innuendo, he's going to be sticking around with this franchise for the foreseeable future. He wants to be a Saint for life. Great, good, wonderful. You're going to have to figure out how to not swallow as much, of the cap hit with him. Alvin Kamara, I think he's got one more good year, if anything, left in him to get this franchise back on track. Heck, he could just say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and head out, retire, because the body ain't what it used to be. The downside, more or less, of putting Alvin Kamara in a position to not be a scat back and be a guy that's just going on the outside, you've seen that man be more up the gut. They need to focus on getting a good running back to fill that position as well for the foreseeable future. So overall, I think the state of New Orleans is in a state of flux with both of their franchises. Obviously, Tulane may be the one saving grace, and we'll go ahead and talk about them. Then we'll get to some of the stuff that happened over the weekend, more just brief recaps, because I want to kind of keep this one more under control. And we'll start off with Tulane. They got a really nice win over FAU. I said it on the pod Thursday. I feel like more likely than not, this Tulane Green Wave team is going to run the table. Now, whether that secures them a spot in the AAC championship game and potentially a spot in the CFP, that remains to be seen. Thanks a lot, UTSA. Jake Retzoff looked a lot better. 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Very nicely done. He also had a really good performance from Jamari McClure. 94 yards off of 10 carries. Damn near 10 yards a carry. That's what you want to see. 162 total yards on the ground. I am impressed, to say the least. This team is getting better down the stretch. It feels like they are back under their own control. Meanwhile, LSU, they were behind the 8 ball very, 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 very early because you had a fumble on the opening drive by Arkansas, but LSU could not capitalize. And then the next thing you know, they go 3 and out. The punt's blocked, and Caleb Wooden walks it in with the greatest of ease to make it 7-0. LSU goes 3 and out again. And you see an 11-play drive for Arkansas. They're already up 14-0. I'm sure. I wasn't necessarily paying attention to social media during this LSU game, but everything that I did see, or kind of glanced at on TV, I didn't read much social media this weekend. Was busy with some other stuff, but I'm almost certain the fan base wanted Frank Wilson's head because they were losing 14-0 in the first quarter to an Arkansas Razorbacks team that it has been a hot minute since LSU lost to the Arkansas Razorbacks. This was a very competitive ball game. LSU comes away with a 23-22 win. LSU hasn't lost that game since 2021. But then again, they've only lost that game twice in the last decade. And three times in the last 11 years. Because they lost in 14 and 15, mainly because I've talked about this before. The tail end of the Les Miles era, they checked out after losing the Alabama game because they knew playoff hopes, they're done. They're dashed. Now you've got to figure out how to get your legs back. Lo and behold, this team winds up playing Arkansas right after, and they would lose that game more often than not. Ditto here, but LSU managed to pull it together. You got a big second quarter from the offense. Michael Van Buren, the man has gotten better. That's all you can ask for. Now that he has the opportunity to start, and I think everybody is going to start noticing very quickly how good this man actually is. Especially if given a chance. They still have a very good shot of getting into a halfway decent bowl game. I don't think there'd be a Duke's Mayo Bowl. Maybe the Pop-Tarts Bowl if they win out the rest of the way. But sitting there with the losses that LSU has, 6-4, 7-5, I think at the end of the day would be a nice little consolation prize on what's probably going to be an opt-out Lydon bowl game, especially with LSU hopefully hiring their next head coach before the season's over or before bowl season really begins, because you're still going to have to focus in on getting really high quality recruits. Flipping on over to some other games across the state of Louisiana. We're going to go to Conference USA real quick here because La Tech had a late night ball game against Washington State, who's 5-5. La Tech, they lost 28-3. And the only score they got was in the second quarter. It was all Wazoo the rest of the way. Eckhouse led the way for those Cougars with 146 yards, 17 of 25 passing, and one tutty. And that one touchdown was from Meredith. This man had 5 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown that was part of the difference. Now we're going to flip it over to the Sun Belt Conference real quick because we need to break down what happened there. Cajuns, they don't have a game till Thursday night, so trust me, you'll be hearing me on Friday breaking down that game and so much more. UL Monroe loses to South Alabama 26-14. Kind of disappointing there. And then we'll flip over to the Southland Conference. We'll go to the FCS real quick. And it is the Southland Conference and the SWAC. Starting off with the Southland Conference. Southeastern wound up being Incarnate Word in a tough ball game. Low-scoring 10-7 win with a strong defensive performance for Southeastern. Those Lions handling business against Incarnate Word. An in-state matchup. Nichols gets a nice win to improve to 4-7 over Northwestern State. 26-21. Shane Lee looking great. 134 yards and 3 tutties in the dub. Jumping over to McNeese State. They lost behind a big performance from Eddie Lee Marburger with 4 touchdowns by the score of 28-13. UTRGV, yeah, gets a nice win over the McNeese State Cowboys. Then we'll flip over to the SWAC to head on home. Wound up having Reggie Davis leading the way for Alcorn State, running for 2 tutties on the way to a 27-16 win over the Tigers. And then Southern, they lose another one, but this one was a lot tougher. They helped kind of stave off and come back for a big win over the Southern Jaguars. Cooper got some really nice. KJ Cooper got 3 touchdowns on the evening. A big rally with 14 points in the final frame being the big difference in the 5-point victory. So trust me, we're near the tail end of the regular season of college football. We're near the second half of the NFL schedule with one New Orleans Saints after the bye week. They're looking to get back into action. Hopefully they do so. But we'll be talking about that and so much more tomorrow on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.